we had a workshop recently with Ohio, recently in June, where it's the governance of informal cross-border trade in Eastern DRC, but I call it in Africa here, because I'm from the DRC. I'm from Eastern DRC, and I like the link between my presentation and Janet, who just spoke. And I worked there for a few years, 4 years, I think. I was based in the capital, but I was going there a lot I was working with a UK aid project that was focusing on private sector development in DRC. And my role was to focus on cross-border trade in Eastern DRC. We started with 10 groups, and then in the second phase of the project, we're focusing on North and South Kivu, which are two provinces right next to Rwanda. And the key thing here was to work with small-scale cross-border traders, and they participate in what is called officially informal cross-border trade. And we are working with them to build capacity, to help them have a better business environment so that you can facilitate trade between the two countries. And the background here is that we found out that they were all trading in different small groups, not really organized, and they were not in associations yet. But then the point of entry for us, and that's me in Goma, discussing with a trader, and she's the head of one of the biggest associations there. Her name is Maman Jeanne. We discovered that they had different groupings that were not really organized in associations, but then the point of entry for us was COMESA, the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa. And COMESA, in addition to promoting free trade amongst its member states, and we all know that how that happens is that you reduce tariffs, because tariffs are what you have at the border. Anything that comes in has to pay tariffs in order to access the market within a country. And what COMESA did, which most RECs in Africa do, is reduce tariffs so that goods and services can move freely across borders. But then usually when that happens, the ones who benefit more from free trade are big companies who are in the formal economy and who pay tariffs and have the money to pay for tariffs and have the money to pay for taxes and everything and all the logistics and everything. But then COMESA understood that there were some people who were left out. And because COMESA is progressive, they came up with a trade policy to make sure that small cross-border traders, usually it's traders who live in border cities or border towns, and who do trade in foodstuff. You can see in the picture, you have cabbage, you have cucumber, you have like fruits and vegetables, grains, etc. So this is foodstuff that they buy from a border town, across the border, and then they sell it in their own country, in their own town, or they produce it in their own town, and then they go and sell it in a town across the border. So most of those informal, and why is this called informal cross-border trade? It's for two reasons. One, most of the traders, but this is evolving now, the definition is evolving. Most of the traders are not officially registered with the state, so the state doesn't know them. They don't pay taxes, or they avoid taxes. And when they cross the border, it's either they don't pay tariffs, or the tariffs that they pay don't end up in the state's treasury. So that's what they called informal cross-border traders, or they're also called small-scale cross-border traders. But it doesn't mean that all of them are operating illegally. Informal doesn't mean illegal, because the ones who are illegal are the smugglers, and not all of these traders smuggle. They use official border posts, official channels, but it's just that they're not seen. And the state doesn't know what's the volume of what is coming in or what is going out. That's why it's called informal cross-border trade. So when we were discussing with them, we discovered that there were small groups and how they were doing. They were going to Rwanda, because when it comes to Congo and Rwanda in that region, it's 80% in and 20% out. So most of the traders that we worked with, and most of them, 75% to 80% were women. Back in the days before COVID, they used to cross and bring the goods in small shipments, either on their heads, or they were using the services of handicapped people who had special bikes that they had adjusted the bike so that they could provide transport services. And these were like just small groups that were doing that. They were not really well organized. And what we were doing for capacity building, it was to put them into associations to make sure that it's an association. It's not just a group of people getting together to get some money from a funder, but the associations where the board or whoever was for the association provides services to the members. And the key services that we're using here were advocacy and market prospection. Why am I talking about this? Is because this is how they were building the trust with their members. Advocacy is because at the border they had to pay illegal taxes. Some people will call it bribe, but then I will just say illegal taxes because they're illegal because they're not in the official code, or they're collected by the wrong people, which means the state will never see that money. So they had to pay, even though they're not registered, they don't pay taxes, and usually they don't pay tariffs. But when you look at the amount of money they will pay, and because they're not safe, because when you're not registered with the state, you're informal, anyone can come and ask you for money, and you will have to do it because you don't want to get into trouble. So those women would suffer that. That's the first thing that they were facing. The second challenge was harassment, whether it's sexual harassment or physical harassment, verbal abuse, everything was mixed there. So what those associations started doing at first was focusing on advocacy to make sure that this doesn't happen. They defend their members, which is the key thing that build the trust between the members and the associations. But then later on, they evolved into speaking on their behalf, not just with the border authorities, but also started speaking to doing some market prospection, going to the other side of the border, speaking to suppliers on the other side of the border to make sure that they know where to find specific goods. Because within those associations, you had different groupings of the ones who sell beans together, who buy beans, cabbage, tomatoes, or etc. So that will be organized in different groupings of specific goods. So what I will start doing is the association will send people to the other side of the border to find out where they can get the best tomatoes at the lowest price. And that's a type of service that we're providing to the members, and the members will pay the dues for that. More and more that evolved, and here when I'm talking about this too, I just want to put names here. We are focused on ACT Bukavu and ACT Goma. ACT means Cross-Border Trader Association, and I forgot to say that this research is funded by the British Academy. I should have said that at the beginning, and that's why I was able to do some field work in Eastern DRC, going back as a researcher after being a consultant there. And ACT Goma and ACT Bukavu have evolved a lot before COVID and after COVID. So now I will focus on COVID, and this is my last slide. At first, we're focusing on the COMESA Simplified Trade Regime that helps small cross-border traders have rules that are adjusted to their needs. One, they don't pay most of the tariffs. They're exempted from them. Two, they don't have to submit the type of paperwork that big traders do. So that's what the COMESA STR focuses on, to help them save more money or make more money, and through that, get out of poverty, because most of them are in poverty. But that's what we were focusing on. Because I'm a lawyer, I was focusing on rules, policies, and that was my main thing. But then we started seeing that beyond the STR, we need to look at the legal system in the countries where the STR is supposed to be implemented, because some of the rules in those countries will influence how the STR is applied. One key thing is, how do the different countries define small-scale cross-border trader? Because if Rwanda has a definition that Congo doesn't have, it's not going to work together, because they're not going to be allowed to be considered as small cross-border traders small-scale traders on one side. And when they go to the other side, they might have to pay taxes that they don't pay in their country. So those are the things that we're focusing on. But how then did I end up talking about paradiplomacy? Is we decided to do a stakeholder mapping to understand who does what in informal cross-border trade. And that's why we started understanding that those associations that we helped create and that we helped build capacity on became bigger than the state. When it comes to who to trust, those traders, when they look at the state, and that's why this presentation, the next one will be formal trade in informal states, because when they think of the state, they think of a state that will charge them a lot of taxes that then they can't pay because they can't afford that. A state that has border officials that harass them at the border, and a state that doesn't do anything for them when they need the state the most. That happened at COVID. When COVID happened, we all know what happened, that most countries closed their borders and said only people with appropriate means of transportation can cross. Most of them didn't have any cars or anything that they could use to cross the borders, which means they could not, some of them lost their businesses because they could not cross anymore. The state didn't do anything to help them. But this is when those associations went to the second phase, where they became so big for their members that they started speaking on their members' behalf to every type of actor in the region. The first one was COVID, because there was COVID. They needed COVID tests in order to cross the border if they could find a car. The COVID test was really expensive, that they could not afford to pay for it. What happened is that they went to speak to a local authority, who then spoke to a funder, who then spoke to a local authority on the other side, and the funder put the two local authorities together, three provinces, North Kivu, South Kivu, and the Western province in Rwanda, to say, what can you do? Because $50, $60 for the test doesn't work for the small cross-border traders. Thanks to the funder and thanks to everything that people put together, the test went down to $5. And the $5, even they went further down for the people who really could not afford it. This is paradiplomacy, because this is not the government in Kinshasa, this is not the government in Kigali. These are provinces and state and non-state actors who negotiated that. They went further and they said, because we cannot cross like we used to do before, let's put ourselves together and we do groupage. Groupage is they put the money together, they rent a car, and they go to the other side, speak to the suppliers, buy the goods, and then bring it back to their members. This is something that they had the idea, came up with the idea, made it happen, spoke to the funders gave them the means to buy small tricycle vehicles, and they started buying stuff on the other side for their members. So they started adding more services, which even built not only the capacity of the association, but also the trust, but also started training other people who are not traders to join the associations and to become traders. When I left Congo in 2021, ACT Bukavu had around 2,000 members. Today they have 5,000 members, and people are still joining. Goma had 7,000. Today they have 12,000, 13,000 members, because people are joining because they see that something is happening. But then the last thing I might want to add here is those associations now, they become so big because usually when a donor or a development program comes to a country, they will discuss with the state, with the government, the official government, and then from there they will come on the ground to do something. But usually what happens is that they come with their preconceived ideas of what should work, and like the World Bank will focus a lot on infrastructure, or very big project. EU project will focus on infrastructure, but I won't really think of speaking to the traders to ask them what are the needs and what is really happening. But then that has started to happen since COVID. Some of the funders have started to speak to the traders and work directly with the traders, and even sign agreements with the traders, which never existed before. We never had thought of an EU project or any international organization signing an agreement with traders, small traders. But it is happening now. And what happened, one of the results of my research, is that the activities that they do with the traders, based on the ideas, the input from the traders, have more impact and actually correspond to the needs of the beneficiaries, because they have spoken and I got the input from them. And this, maybe last thing I would say, is what I like at the end is local authorities, now that I understand that because they're closer to the traders, they understand them better. Associations, because they speak to their members and they know how to defend them better than anybody else. What they've done now, even the World Bank has adjusted, they created consultation committees within towns at the borders, and they meet often so that they can discuss of what are the issues at the borders that we're facing, who is harassing us, who is doing what, how can we make this happen in a most efficient way and better. Why? And in this situation, which is now what I'm going to say in the end of my article about this research, is the state is benefiting even without doing much. Because now, when I went back and I spoke to customs authorities, they said, this informal cross-border trade, we didn't really know much about it before, but since COVID, money has started coming in from those traders that we didn't think had money. We just thought that they had money for bribes, but now the money is coming into the treasury and we don't understand where were we before that we didn't understand this. But they say maybe it's because now they're doing in group H. That's why we can see the money. We can see they're visible. But here is just maybe the last thing I would say is we look at, and I like the first presentation because he talked about regionalism from below. We are used to the other approach, whether it's NAFTA or EU, etc., where we focus on the nation state, we focus on the tariffs, we focus on delimitation of borders, etc. Whereas in Africa, integration didn't start with colonization or colonialism, it started before because we were trading with each other without those states. And I'll always make this joke in my presentation to say the traders always say, why are you talking about free trade? Trade was free before. And then Belgium arrived and then the UK arrived, etc. They decided that from now on, this is going to be Congo, this is going to be Kenya, this is going to be Rwanda, this is going to be, etc. They're the ones who disrupted the trade that was there before. So when you come back and tell us that you want free trade, you're actually going back to what was there before. So for me, and I might be wrong to say this, the real regionalism or the real integration, regional integration in Africa is that one. The one that doesn't really care about the borders. I'm not promoting illegality or criminality, but the ones the one that doesn't really care about the borders because they have the same people on both sides of the borders who will trade no matter what. Even if you decide to cross the border for 6 months, they will still trade until you come and arrest.
Excellent.